So Hasbara al-Hasbir is a Hebrew word to explain. It colloquially means like public relations. So there's really two elements to Hasbara. There's the education and there's the advocacy, right? And that's really what I talk about tonight. Now, in terms of Hasbara, we have to work out who is our audience, right? Who are we talking to? Anybody who's ever spent any time on social media will know that not everybody in social media is open-minded, yeah, to say the least. Right? So the way we generally think about it is there are 5 or 10% of people on the extremes, right? There's 5 or 10% of people who, no matter what you say, they will always hate Israel. There are 5 or 10% of people who, no matter what you say, will always love Israel. Right? And then there's the 80 to 90% in the middle, who are not anti-Israel, right? If anything, they're probably apathetic. They just don't really care that much. And when Israel's not in the news, they're not lying in bed at night thinking about, what's going on in Israel, I wonder. Right? They're just the rest of the world living their lives. So when we talk about Hasbara, it's very, very difficult to convince the 5 and 10% and the 5 and 10%. Right? Those people aren't changing their minds. There's probably nothing you can say or show that they will even listen to. Right? It's the 80, 90% in the middle who is really open to education and advocacy. Right? Education because they just don't know. Right? They're just not informed on the topic. And advocacy because they might have only heard one side, but if they're presented with the other side, so that could potentially change their mind. Or at least give them a balanced view. Okay. All right. I also just want to touch on, why do we care about Hasbara? What's the purpose of Hasbara? Yeah? I don't live in Israel. I'm not an Israeli citizen. Why do I care? Do I have a responsibility to care? Yeah,
because we're Jewish people.
Okay, good. So I'm happy to take reasons. Okay, why is it important? Why is Hasbara an important topic to talk about tonight? And why is it something that I think all of us here, and I'm sure at home, have at least some level of responsibility to be advocates for? So it's a Jewish people thing.
We're Jewish people, and in case, God forbid, things will change with the world.
Right.
A lot of countries can fight Israel or something. We have a home. Israel is our home.
Good.
We have somewhere to go to.
So even though we don't live in Israel yet,
we support it, yeah.
Good. Beautiful. I love it. Yes, I agree.
I think we have a lot of family and friends in Israel. A lot of people have people that they care about it there. You have people that live there, you care about the state in which they live in.
Absolutely.
Is there something along the lines of like Russian horror or whatever, dealing with that's what's going on, as in people are saying bad things that aren't necessarily true?
I think there is something to do to that. And I think also the fact that lies bother me. It bothers me when people say things that are untrue. In this context and also in other contexts as well. So I think as Jews, we do have some level of responsibility to stand up for the truth. I think there is something to that. Yeah, as Jews, we do have some level of responsibility to stand up for the truth and also to stand up for Hashem and his people and the land. I think there is something to do that. There's no question that fighting to defend the Jewish people and the land of Israel is a tremendously holy thing to do. And that would include not just literally being part of the army, but also fighting to defend Israel and the Jewish people against its enemies in all their different forms, right? Including online.
Can I say something personal? A little
Okay.
bit?
Just be aware that there's a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. Not that personal.
Therapy's tomorrow night, so...
Not that personal. No. Not that personal.
I've got this rash on my leg. No, go on.
When I lived in ex-USSR,
Yes.
no. Okay. I just felt that if Israel didn't disappear or didn't exist, I would feel like an orphan.
Okay.
Having Israel even far away from me physically, it gives a warm feeling that we have a home.
Yeah.
Because all those countries we live in, it's a temporary kind
Yeah,
of
100%.
uncertain existence.
We talked about this last week in terms of
I
political
was
Zionism and the idea of in a post Holocaust world, right? One of the impetuses for setting up the State of Israel, what the State of Israel was, it's a country for Jews where we control our own destiny. We're not at the whims of whatever European leaders choose to do or not do. Yeah, it's a place where Jews live with the Jewish government, and where we're not someone else's property.
Yeah, we must have our country.
Yeah. Which also touches on another issue, that the idea of at what point does this become anti-Semitism? Yeah. Is it anti-Israel or is it anti-Jewish? Anti-Semitism is a whole other topic. That's next week's topic. But certainly, in terms of Hasbara, you have to look at these things through the lens of anti-Semitism. They're not unconnected. Let's put it that way. I think also another reason for Hasbara is the reality is that people's opinions affect government policy. Right? Governments are very, very susceptible to the will of the people. At least most countries and most governments. And so, it is important to stand up and say, that's not right. Yeah, that's not the way we should be looking at the issues. That's not the way the government should be formulating policy in terms of Israel. I would also add something about Jewish unity. Throughout Jewish history, there is a phenomenon that when the Jewish people are united, we punch above our weight. Good things tend to happen. When the Jewish people are divided, we are our own worst enemies. Yeah. The way to be on the right side of Jewish history is to be a united Jewish people. I think that's also important. And finally, I would just say that, and we touched on it before, that whether you live in Israel or not, the entire Jewish people are our family. Right? Some of them are closer, some of them are more distant family, but we're all family. And when someone attacks your family, you don't just sit there and ignore it. Right? You stand up and you defend your family. Like, this is my family. Particularly when we're talking about accusations, and untrue things. Right? We need to do something about that. Let me ask you this. Why does the world get it so wrong? This is not the first time we've taught about this issue, right? It's kind of every few years that it comes up. Why does the world get it so wrong? Why are we constantly in this situation where Israel's under attack? Where does that come from? What are some of the reasons for that? This is like, Microsoft and Apple back in the day, where Apple had a better product, but Microsoft had a better PR team, right? And for some reason, Israel just always seems to be behind the ball in terms of PR.
Yeah, but all the other countries, nothing to do with Hamas. England, America, Spain, Italy, they all hate Jews. All the countries have, almost all the countries.
To varying extents.
Nothing to do with Hamas.
Depends, but
during the World War, Italy, Mussolini.
True, but that might have been a different situation, though. Okay, good. So let's go through some of these. So anti-Semitism, we said I like that one. I don't like it. I think it's true. We sort of touched on the idea of Israel being held to a different standard. Yeah, the world expects a level of ethics and morality from Israel that they have no expectation of any other countries. Right? No one expects either Russia or Ukraine to act in an ethical way. But when it comes to Israel, Israel's expected to go above and beyond.
Why is that?
We'll talk about that. I'd say also, it also happens to be very safe to criticize Israel. You know that expression like nobody ever got fired for buying IBM?
Right.
Like nobody ever lost their job in the media for criticizing Israel. So Israel has a free media. You can go to Israel, you can live in a nice 5-star hotel in Tel Aviv, you can say whatever you want. Okay? You can't go to Gaza and criticize the Palestinians. Okay? That's how you get dead. Right? So that's naturally going to create a one-sided narrative.
Do you think that's part of the reason why all the doctors are lying about all these things?
Yes. Because if you had a gun to your head, you would also lie, and probably convincingly. Understand there's also no free press in Gaza. Right? All the information in Gaza comes from Hamas. So it's not exactly in their interest to present a balanced view.
Sorry, Israeli democracy, if I can, it's kind of in all countries are democratic, like Australia, for
Well, that's not
example.
true. Some
We don't
countries
have
are, some
anyone
countries
in
aren't.
parliament here saying that Australia shouldn't exist.
That's true.
That and go out in the open against
The
Australia.
difference is in Israel you have 10 Arab members of the Knesset,
Yeah.
some of whom actively advocate that Israel shouldn't exist.
But they can't be in parliament.
That's
in
insane.
Okay.
Right? That's insane. No,
So,
Israel they can be.
Israeli democracy
No, they can be.
is insane. It's
Yes.
not. It's a democracy in the minus
There's
because
a proposal to
it's
make a
destroying the
law in
country.
Israel that if you're a member of the Knesset, you can't advocate for the destruction of Israel. That's so insane. Yeah.
so why is their democracy different from ours here?
It's not. That's the point.
Now, our democracy.
If someone in Australia wanted to advocate for the destruction of Israel, for the destruction of Australia, you could.
If a member of parliament here will
So in
say
America, you can.
Australia shouldn't exist
Yeah.
because Australia occupied the Aboriginal land or whatever, and
By the way, there
I
are
went through.
during the whole voice situation.
It was
there were
exactly
people-
yeah, but they lost because it's ridiculous.
Okay, but whether they lost or they won is not the point. The point is that there were people advocating
But-
that Australia had done tremendous
but-
wrongs.
No one openly says Australia shouldn't exist,
that.
and we should fight Australian government like they do. in
But the
Israel.
point is that you could if you wanted to.
They did.
Yeah, I think there was something
And
there.
they even did it during COVID times too. Like we weren't in the democracy during COVID times.
Yeah.
And
But anyway, the point is not whether they do or not. The point is that you could.
They
Whereas in Gaza you cannot.
They even support terrorism. Some of them, some of those parties in Israel,
True.
out in the open.
Right.
So how
And
is
again,
that?
that's what you're going to have with free media. As in America, you have the same thing as well. You have people in America who advocate for an undoing of the government. Let's put it like that. Right? They even have guns, lots of them.
I think countries who threaten America or speak against America, they're being attended to in some way.
We're not talking about other countries, we're talking about American citizens who part of the rights in living in a democratic country with a free media is you can criticize the government and the structures of government. Correct. Okay, other things. I think there's also a certain intellectual laziness that some people have, where they go, I don't know who's right and who's wrong, so let's just blame both sides equally. Let's assume everybody's done the wrong thing, cycle of violence kind of thing. How can we really know the truth? Probably both sides are lying. And just a level of like, I don't know.
My cognitive dissonance, though, is why does Hamas get the treatment they did, where everything that Hamas did is alleged, versus when ISIS went out and committed terrorism? Even CNN and all these other, more left-wing things, nobody was saying nice things really about ISIS. I'm saying ISIS allegedly did all this terrorism. And it's like ISIS did terrorism. It was like ISIS is a bad terrorist organization and they should be shut down.
Yeah.
But with Hamas, in a lot of the news, everything, no matter how much evidence you do, everything is alleged unless it's like Hamas
Unless Israel
themselves
did it.
saying that, yeah, we did it. Like, Hamas
And
basically
even
said that they did the October 7th thing. They've admitted,
Right.
we've planned this and we did that. So,
But even
everyone's like,
then-
okay, yeah, they did that. But anything else, they're like, oh, but did they really go to tunnel that we're sitting here looking at right now? Or did they really march hostages
even-
to the hospital? There's
even-
video evidence of it.
Even when Hamas says something, there are many Western media platforms that will try and twist Hamas's words so that it doesn't sound quite as bad as what they
So
said.
why is
Like,
why
what
is
they
that?
said. Like, what,
Why,
to him
why
was
is how is Hamas and ISIS different? They're both exactly the same terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
That's what I just don't understand.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Two more ideas. Virtue signaling. I think there's a certain percentage of the Western world, your left-wing woke crowd, who want to demonstrate their bona fides by always identifying with the oppressed minority in any scenario, right? That gets us into cause hijacking, which we talked a little bit about before. The idea of all these other groups who really have no connection to Hamas and Palestinians coming out in support of them, right? This is like the climate changes and the Queers for Gaza and all this sort of stuff. People who are just looking to ride on the coattails of someone else's persecuted minority.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like all of us persecuted minorities are in this together. We're not, but we can ride on their coattails, right? This also gets to what we said before about the Arab world. There are many parts of the Arab world that have, for the last, 70 years, used the Palestinians as their excuse for doing whatever they wanted to do. Here we go. Let's talk about Hasbara.
Welcome.
So those are some of the problems. Those are some of the causes.
What do you drink?
Here's what I want to do now.
Do you drink soda
There
water?
is way too much
Let me get you soda water.
stuff, information. If we try and deal with every specific little claim that someone has ever made against Israel, we'll be here all night. What I want to try and do is categorize things into a few general techniques and a few general topics. Okay? 3 techniques and then 5 topics. Okay? We'll try to include as much as we can within those 3 techniques and those 5 topics. Okay. Technique number 1 for Hasbara is, Gali, this is for you, is to highlight the positives about Israel and the Jewish people. Right? Just because someone else wants to be negative doesn't mean you have to be negative. The reality is that for a lot of people, remember those 90% of people in the middle, the apathetic 90% in the middle, it's not that they're anti-Israel, it's that they don't know anything about Israel. All they know about Israel is what they've learned from CNN and BBC and whatnot. Okay? So you can't always assume, you shouldn't always assume that people are aware of all of the positives about Israel. Okay? So that's a very easy place to start. You can talk about the fact that Israel is a Western democracy, right? The only one in the Middle East. You talk about Israel has free speech, free media, religious freedom, right? Israel protects religious sites, Christian and Muslim religious sites. We can talk about Israel has equality for women, for Arabs, for Druze, for Bedouins, for other religions, right? You could talk about how multicultural Israel is. Right? Israel is a country of immigrants. There's one of every kind there. Talk about Israel is a leader in high tech. There's lots and lots of online materials for this sort of stuff. What's that? Medical, yes. Environmental issues, farming, making the desert blue, all that sort of stuff. You can talk about the help Israel provides to other countries after natural disasters. You can talk about the idea of the law of return. Yeah, which is insane when you think about it, that every Jew can automatically get citizenship in Israel. Israel is not just a country for Israelis, it is a country for Jews wherever they are in the world. Okay? No other country in the world does that. Try rocking up to America and being like, hi, I'm here. Yeah, it doesn't work that well.
I mean, you can.
You might be able to see it, but
I'm
that's cheating.
But this finishes when it comes to law of return for Arabs.
Good, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Israel.
This
Okay.
is Israel.
Good, you're right. You're right. I said Jewish people. I didn't say Arabs. That's true. We talk about why that's the case. Okay, but that's true. The distinction that you're making. Okay, you could talk about how Israel is fighting not just local terror but global terror. Right. The reality is that most of the groups who hate Israel also hate America and the rest of the West. Yeah? Israel is the small Satan. America is the big Satan. You could talk about how Israel has been willing to sacrifice land for peace. We'll talk about that more shortly. You could talk about how Israel, the IDF is the most ethical army in the world. We'll talk about that more shortly as well. Okay, there's lots of positive things about Israel that you could talk about in addition to addressing specific negative concerns people have about Israel. So the first technique for Hasbara is focus on good stuff, not just bad stuff. You don't want to be on the defensive all of the time. Okay, the second technique I would point out is a lot of the claims against Israel are either out of context or without historical context. Right? It's very easy to pretend that things started yesterday or that this specific thing is all I want you to focus on. But when you take a step back and look at things in a bigger context, that can completely change people's perspectives. Right? An obvious example would be the fact that Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. right? That changes the conversation completely. Since 2005, the last 18 years, Gaza has been run by the Palestinians. They've had complete control over everything that happens there, right? Hamas was a elected government in 2007, right? They're in the 16th year of their 4-year term, yeah. But they were elected by the people of the Gaza.
After they eliminated their rivals.
No, after they won, then they eliminated Fatah and sent them back to the West Bank. Most people thought Fatah was going to win that election, but Hamas won.
That means that there are no innocent civilians in Gaza because they elected Hamas.
Well, I'm not sure you want to say that.
When?
Because by the same argument, if you voted for Dan Andrews, then you're responsible for everything you did.
I didn't vote for him.
Okay. But you live in a democracy, so you get the person who wins, even if you didn't vote for them.
But did Gaza really have democracy? How do we know it was
You were
really
trying to
democratic?
learn
They did have elections. The two choices were Fatah or Hamas.
If the other guy might not be effective.
Well, you have the West Bank. Fatah is a military wing of
Wouldn't have been
PA.
And those civilians celebrate when,
Not great over there. Not great.
and those civilians celebrate when they kill people in Israel. So they celebrate.
Okay, good. But good. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. What you're saying is true. That's true. But the point here is to realize that it's not like Israel has been occupying Gaza and the Palestinians are trying to throw out the Israelis, right? Israel hasn't had a presence in Gaza for the last 16 years. But that is putting something in context, right? I think if you would ask your average person, your average protester in a lot of countries at the moment who are out there chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, right? They probably don't actually understand that Gaza has been free
Exactly.
for the past 16 years. Good, you and I are agreeing. Don't hit me, okay?
Yeah, but I think most of those people honestly think that Palestine is also Israel, and it's not just when they say river to the sea, they actually mean from the Gaza to the West Bank and then all of Israel, and
They
then
mean
all
the
that
whole-
is actually Palestine, and that the Jews have no right.
They
Good.
mean the
So
whole
Simon, that's another good example. All the people walking out saying from the river to the sea, how many of those people actually understand where that comes from, what it means? Most people, I would think, would just think that means the specific situation in Gaza now.
I don't
Israel
think so.
shouldn't be killing Palestinians.
I think most of them, if you read this stuff, most of them understand what it means. It means that Israel shouldn't be a Jewish state, and that's what they're advocating. They're saying it should be, the whole thing should go to
I
Palestine.
disagree. Again, I think there's a percentage of people who do, but I think a lot of the people who are out there on the streets marching these days are making a protest about the current specific situation,
Yeah.
not about the last 75 years.
But can I ask, because
Yeah.
this is not clear in my head, and geography is not my
Yes.
thing, so I don't really know, and there's been so much going on. Didn't once upon a time an area somewhere around there be called Palestine, Israel, or something? Because I feel like that's what the rest of society thinks they're fighting for. Is when once upon a time on the
There
map-
was never a Palestine. Okay, we'll talk about this a little bit as we go.
But I think
There was
that's
never a
what
country
Israel-
called Palestine. There was the Turkish Ottoman Empire, of which what we call Israel, Palestine today, was a part of. There was never a separate country
'cause I
in
think that's what the
Palestine.
rest of the world's fighting for.
I understand, but again, that would be a new reality. That's not going back to something that was there before.
No, but they think that's what. That's.
understand,
I think.
okay.
I think what they think is that was on the map before.
Right.
We've come and done something,
Right.
and it should go back to how the map
Right.
was before.
So I
And
would.
they don't even have a clue. But
I would refer you to last week's topic when we talked about the modern state of Israel and how essentially when the Turkish Ottoman Empire lost World War One, they sided with the Axis armies, with the Germans and the Austrians and everyone else, right? When they lost, so essentially the Turkish Ottoman Empire was taken over by the Allies. The French and the British basically divided up what we call modern day Middle East, and they created almost all of the countries that are in the Middle East today. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, all these countries are modern creations, the 1920s and 1930s, right? As was Israel, in a political sense.
Free Palestine used to mean a long time ago. So Jews can live there. So English and Turks can go I just read about it today. Free Palestine used to mean free Palestine for Jews. So Jews can live there.
So in the
No, it
1930s,
really-
during the British Mandate, there was equal. The Jews were the ones who were saying, you know, we should be able to live freely in the land of Palestine.
That's right.
Yes, that's true. Okay, again, the point here is the second point. The second technique is to educate people on context and history, because a lot of these things make a difference, right? You're framing the argument differently by explaining the context and the history. Yeah? And we shouldn't assume that people know the context and the history, because most people don't. That's the reality. Yeah. Most people in the world couldn't find Israel on a map, much less Gaza. So the technique number 3 is where I want to spend most of the time tonight. Technique number 3 is, it's very powerful to have a little bit of information. Like, it's fun to yell accusations, but it's also fun to have some actual information, some actual facts. Okay? There are 5 categories I want to focus on and just go through some of the facts about the situation. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is the idea of media and intersectional coalition biases. Okay, first topic. Second topic is going to be the question of, do both sides want peace? That's going to be the second topic. The third topic is going to be the idea of occupation and stealing land. The fourth topic is going to be the idea of excessive force. Okay, to deal with that. And the fifth one is going to be the idea of Israel being a racist or apartheid state. Okay, those are the 5 topics I want to go through now. Okay, starting with media and intersectional coalition bias. It goes like this. You know what, let's take a step back. What are some examples of media bias? What are some examples of where the media, and it could be print, it could be TV, it could be social media, it could be anything.
And press told you what was true and wasn't true. Shut things down.
Meaning when the algorithm didn't play fair, it gave precedence to one side or the other. Yes, that would be media bias, correct.
And it would shut you down if it thought you were
Yeah,
on the side
yeah,
and didn't want
yeah.
it to be.
I mean, Twitter got into a lot of trouble for this sort of stuff during the election, absolutely, yes. Good.
And a good example is Rupert Murdoch shutting down stories that isn't like in his box.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. What else? Some other examples of media bias.
Julian Assange.
Who are?
Julian Assange.
How is that media bias?
Well, it's not media bias, but what he represents.
Okay.
Maybe it's a bit too out there for the.
Meaning that the government, meaning
Well,
that the media
Well,
has
he's been
a
shut
certain
down.
government line that they give over,
Mm.
and they don't even might undermine that.
Yeah, I guess.
Is that the kind of, yeah,
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's a bit out there for
Okay.
this, but I guess.
Okay, so some ideas.
What?
I think Facebook is a good example.
Okay.
Facebook only shows anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish. You can post anything you like, but as soon as I post something, you know,
Pro-Jewish.
anti-Arab or anti-Gaza or something, they shut it down straight away. And
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely media bias. Yes.
we
You,
we deleted your post
Yeah.
because it's against our standards.
Right.
And they would show what they deleted,
so
and they would say,
applying the rules unevenly. Right? Let's say there are laws against hate speech. Someone's going to decide what is hate speech and what isn't. And if that's not being applied fairly, then that would be an example of media bias, correct? Definitions are a big one. Yeah? The idea of, Al Qaeda has terrorists, Hamas has freedom fighters.
Mhm.
We could talk about the idea of unbalanced reporting. 5 Israelis were killed, but 5 Palestinians were also killed. Turns out those 5 Palestinians were the terrorists who killed the 5 Israelis, but it's 5 and 5, so it's
Yeah.
basically the same.
Yeah.
it's shocking.
Isn't the age a little bit more biased than the Australian?
Innocent civilians died, and they don't say they
It's
were
definitely
Standard of evidence, I think
less
that's a big one
pro
now, is
Israel.
like, how
Yeah,
much
less
more
pro- you're
I don't want to
right,
call
yeah.
it. I don't want to call it. No, I don't know.
No.
The Australians
They're
also
not
biased. Like we just like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Israel has committed some sort of crime.
I mean, one of the things out here is the
I
idea
never
of
thought I would read the
trusting
Australian,
Hamas
and I never
and
thought
that
I would
everything
stop
they
reading
say.
The Age.
Right,
But that's what happened
when
since
the
I'm
Gaza mission
37.
was
Me and
which
Sydney
is
have
a
read The Age.
Hamas
We read the
organisation,
Australian.
I
you know,
read The
5
Age
minutes after something happens, or he
for
says, you know,
30 years.
3,000 children were killed and they were all innocent.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you
I
just
think
made
the
up
rocket in the hospital was, to me, the best case. Immediately, every news organization believed Hamas saying
Yeah.
Israel attacked, even though
Yeah.
there was evidence very early on
Yeah.
that a rocket misfired. And it took weeks and weeks before media organizations even acknowledged, okay, yeah, it turned out Hamas actually accidentally
And
killed
again,
like 5
part of the
people.
problem
But
is-
let's bury that story
Part of the
right
problem
away.
is there's no independent validation of what Hamas says because you can't go to the Gaza Strip and independently verify things. And you know, the media generally accepts things without even as much as a disclaimer. Right? It's not reported as Hamas reports, it's reported as this is what happened.
So standard of evidence, I think, is a big one.
Good, good. We could talk about lack of context, getting the idea of something happened, but if I take it out of context, then it changes what happened. Right? Israel destroys a house of a suicide bomber. Right? The context is important. We can talk about selective omission. Yeah, again, not pointing out the positives, only ever pointing out the negatives, if that says your agenda. We could talk about using true facts to draw false conclusions. Since Israel has a very modern and very well-equipped army, that must mean they are the aggressors. Right? Half of that is true, half of that is not true. But if you make it sound like a run-on, then it sounds like the whole thing is true.
Like burying stories and like deprioritizing them that don't fit a narrative that you're trying to
Or
build.
just not reporting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think this idea of acting like there is a correlation and a connection between two things where there isn't. You know, like I said before, like you know the BLM and the Palestinian people, or you know LGBTQ, you know, and the Palestinian people, or climate change, and like connecting issues for the purpose of saying we're all like their cause is our cause.
Well, even that one with the whatever multi-sexual
Yeah.
orientation, that there was somebody in their country that said I'm this and came to Israel for safety.
Yeah.
And they came and found them and killed them
Yeah,
in Israel. So it's,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be many of those people in Gaza. Wouldn't
or
work out well for
within,
you.
or within an area they can find you.
Yeah, it wouldn't work out well for you.
Israel is trying to get rid of Al Jazeera, but they're trying to find a lawful way to do it. They don't want just to throw them out.
Right.
They want to find a legal way to ask them to leave.
Okay.
Because Al Jazeera portrays, the events in Israel
Yes.
one-sided.
Al Jazeera has a strong opinion about that.
Yeah.
That's true.
And Israel's trying to get rid of them, but they should just throw them out. But
All right. Double standards. Double standards. Again, the media holds Israel to a completely different standard. It holds the rest of the world. This notion of Israel is fighting a defensive war, and they're responsible for the well-being of the civilians of the country, of the group that attacked them. Yeah, no other country gets held to that standard. When America invaded Afghanistan after 9/11, nobody asked, nobody suggested America was responsible for the safety and security and well-being of the Afghani people. The best example, by the way, is that in World War II, right, the Allies had a policy of killing German civilians, right? Allies would bomb German cities for the express purpose of killing German civilians as a way of demoralizing the people, okay? For the best example, February 1945, the Allies bombed Dresden. They bombed Dresden, which is a large city in Germany, with high flammable explosives. They basically turned the whole city into a inferno. They killed 25,000 people.
and Wolf didn't care about that.
25,000 civilians. And that was considered, well, that's what you had to do to win the war.
Yeah, but in this case,
Okay? There's a tremendous double standard. You understand, America dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II in order to prevent further deaths afterwards, right? The death toll is somewhere around 200,000 people, and that was the immediate short term. Forget the long-term effects. Right? Again,
And there's studies that say that they actually killed less civilians by doing it that way than
good.
they would.
Whether you think that's the right thing or the wrong thing, the point is that Israel was held to a double standard. Yeah. Obviously, Israel would make the case that we'll get that afterwards. We'll do it now. One of the other things I also find crazy is how no one has any expectations that the rest of the Arab world should do anything to help the Palestinians. Egypt and Jordan don't want one Palestinian. A lot of them are, let's call them militants, and a lot of them are, certainly not like Hamas people aligned with Iran, right? And yeah, we understand, a lot of the Arab countries, it suits their purposes more to have the Palestinian people exist as a.
It's okay. That's the cheap one.
It wasn't my fault. To exist as a refugee problem, because that serves other people's purposes. But again, the media doesn't push back on that for a second.
The problem is Egypt doesn't want the
Yes.
Muslim Brotherhood to come back and take
Nobody
over,
wants them.
and Jordan doesn't
That's
want their
what I
king
mean.
to be
That's what
assassinated
they're
again.
saying for them to go.
So again, say from who though?
From what they're under already, being under Hamas. Because
Well-
in the end, everyone's keeping them locked in this because it suits their military, whatever it is.
Right.
And then they've got this leadership that's like,
Right.
pretty
So there are
much
a number of
getting
ways
them
out.
killed.
One of them would be to get rid of Hamas. Israel's trying to help them with that. Another way would be for international organizations to actually come in and prevent the violence and actually make sure the humanitarian aid gets through. Okay. No one's offering to do that. No one's stupid. Another thing would be for another Arab country to take them in. And believe me, the world would pay a lot of money for an Arab country to do that, but nobody wants that. Right? There are an awful lot of solutions to the problem. Yeah, so why is Israel considered to be the only solution to the problem? Like, it makes no sense. It's a bias. Okay, so that was point one, was the idea of media bias, right? There is a tremendous problem here that the media is biased, and a lot of other groups are using the Palestinian cause to further their own ideology, their own cause, and that is perpetuating the problem. Because they don't want the problem to be solved. They don't want a solution. They want the problem to continue. Okay, second point I want to talk about was the idea of, do both sides really want peace? Okay, where to start? I'm sure everybody by now has heard the Hamas charter calls for the destruction of Israel. Right? It's pretty hard to make peace with someone who their stated purpose for existing is to destroy you. Hamas is not a humanitarian organization. They are a terrorist organization. They've made it perfectly clear. Right? They say it all of the time. Most of the Western countries have Hamas listed as a terrorist organization. Yeah, America does, Australia does. I looked it up today. Listen to the way the Australian government describes Hamas. Hamas is ideologically and religiously motivated violent extremist organization, which fuses Palestinian nationalist and Sunni Islamist objectives. Hamas's overarching goal is to liberate Palestine by establishing an independent Palestinian state comprising Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, guided by Islamic principles and destroying Israel as a political entity in the process. Hamas supports a strategy of armed resistance in pursuit of its goals. The Australian government assesses that Hamas is directly or indirectly engaged in preparing for, planning, assisting in fostering and doing the acts of terrorism and advocates for the doing of terrorist acts. Okay? The Australian government still says straight out, Hamas is a terrorist organization who wants the destruction of Israel.
But that's just political lip service.
But how you can then have government ministers coming out and saying, no, Israel should make a peace deal, Israel should give up, Israel should make a sit, like, you can't have it both ways.
But they do.
By the way, it's illegal in Australia to donate money to Hamas. Okay? It is illegal to, okay, says the Australian government. Australia has listed Hamas as a terrorist organization, and it is also a designated entity subject to counter-terrorism financing sanctions under Australian sanctions law. It is a criminal offence to fund listed terrorist organisations, either directly or indirectly. It is also a criminal offence for a person to provide or collect funds where that person knows or is reckless to the fact that the funds will be used to facilitate or engage in a terrorist act.
But what is
If
that?
you donate money to Hamas,
But
you are committing a crime.
But what
Again,
is-
like the Australian law is clear. America is similar. The EU similarly.
Would anyone donate money from Australia to Hamas? Wouldn't they donate it to a laundromat or a shop, and then it gets siphoned off to Hamas?
But if everybody knows that the money is going to Hamas,
Yeah.
right, you have to be pretty stupid.
But there must be people living in Melbourne whose family in Gaza that
And
would
it
be
is-
donating money to the family. I don't know. I'm just curious because I'd never thought
I'm
about
just
this
reading the
before.
law.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay?
fascinating.
You know,
I don't know if that's something that
you know, understand, Hamas has plenty of money. Okay? Hamas collects something like 150 million US dollars in taxes. They tax everything that comes in via Egypt and via Israel. They have an investment portfolio of $500 million. They receive a lot of money in donations, probably $100 million a year from Iran, $360 million from Qatar, $300 million from Turkey each year. There's no shortage of money. The reason why the Palestinian people are an impoverished refugee people is not because nobody's giving them money. Let's be clear on that, okay? The reason why the money isn't going to the Palestinian people is because it's being stolen, right? The UN alone spends about $600 million a year, US, in Gaza, okay? You know, the leaders of Hamas generally live overseas. They live very comfortable, wealthy lifestyles. Okay.
So they don't even live there.
And then
They don't live there. They live in Qatar, they live in London, they live in Turkey, they live in places that are safe. Gaza is not a safe place. They don't have a great place to raise your kids. Yeah. So, you know, Hamas takes the money that is brought into the Palestinian economy and they do things like build tunnels and build weapons. Okay. You know, and of course the tunnels are built, you know, under schools and under hospitals and, you know, this notion of there's a shortage of fuel in Gaza. It's not true. There's a shortage of fuel for the Palestinian civilians. Hamas has plenty of fuel stockpiled. Everybody knows this. Right? So, again, you can't blame Israel for the fact that Hamas is stealing resources from the Palestinian people. That's not on Israel, that's on Hamas. And at least Israel's trying to do something about it. No one else is. You know, we could talk about the brainwashing and things in Palestinian schools. That's a whole separate topic. We don't have to do it tonight. But at the end of the day, you know, the most basic function of a government is to protect their civilians. Right? Hamas is the government, and they are not protecting or providing for the Palestinian people.
Quite opposite. They use
Quite
them.
opposite. Understand? If Hamas used all of those tunnels as bomb shelters for Palestinians, right? There'd be no point in Israel bombing Gaza. Everyone would be living underground. The problem is the tunnels are not available for the use of the Palestinian people as bomb shelters because they weren't built for that. They were built to be used as terror tunnels. You know, the reason why the Gaza Strip doesn't have electricity and water and all these other things is because all the money that's been given for those things and all of the equipment, the concrete, the pipes, everything else, has been taken by Hamas to use for weapons.
And there was something, isn't there, in the UN about, like, it was something to do with breaking the Geneva Convention or something to do with hospitals and things being built. And there's
Yeah, we'll
something
talk about that. We'll talk about that. We'll get there. Yeah, that has with war crimes and things. So that's who you want to make peace with, Hamas. Okay, it literally goes against their purpose for existing. That's not going to happen. If we flip it, Israel, on the other hand, you know, Israel said from the very beginning of the modern state of Israel that they want peace with the neighbors. When Ben Gurion declared independence in 1948, May 14th, right? Listen to what he said. We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace and good neighborliness, and appeal to them to establish bonds of cooperation and mutual help with the sovereign Jewish people settled in its own land. The state of Israel is prepared to do its share in a common effort for the advancement of the entire Middle East. Okay? Over and over and over again, Israel has tried to make peace by making compromises. Yeah, we could talk about 1937, the Peel Commission. We could talk about 1947, the Partition Plan. We could talk about in 1979, Israel returned Gaza to Egypt for the sake of peace. And Israel has a peace deal with Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. Right? Israel has no problem making peace with the neighbors. They like that very much. Right? 1990s, the Oslo Accord. Israel was willing to give up a tremendous amount to get peace. 2000 Camp David. Yeah, Israel was willing to give up 97% of what the land the Palestinians wanted. Military control of East Jerusalem, the old city. Family reunifications. Right? Arafat walked out without a counter deal. Israel has made peace in the last 3 years with the UAE, with Sudan, with Morocco, with Bahrain. Right? Israel is very, very close to a peace deal with Saudi Arabia Israel is very willing and very capable of making peace. Yeah. So you can't say, you know why there isn't peace? Because Israel doesn't want it. This is ridiculous.
But I do say,
But you understand the facts don't support that.
the world doesn't
You
care about
can
the
say the world is banana shaped, right? The problem is if you look at it from outer space, it doesn't look like a banana. I understand you can still say it, but it doesn't make it true just by saying it.
And even the Saudis, like publicly, they're denouncing like all this stuff, but privately, they want to do business with Israel. Like when all this is over, the Saudis, that's going to continue on because they become much more business and
I have
capitalist.
no problem with countries like UAE making peace with Israel for economic purposes. No problem whatsoever. It's good for everyone. It's good for Israel as well, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it's not. I'm not questioning their motives. I don't care. Just stop killing us. You don't have to like us, right? We're the kind of peace where we don't talk to each other. That's fine, but stop trying to kill us.
I think even in Dubai, isn't there like a synagogue in Dubai now or something?
UAE has a lot of. They have restaurants. They have synagogues. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's very popular for Israelis to go. I mean, it was. I don't know about now, but yeah. Historically speaking, it's always been good for countries to have Jews in them. It's always been good. That's not tonight's topic. Okay, so the second point in terms of why can't we just have peace? The answer is that there is no partner for peace. And by the way, replacing Hamas with a Palestinian Authority is also not going to work because the Palestinian Authority also doesn't want peace, right? Mahmoud Abbas did his thesis on Holocaust denial, right? Like, you can't talk to a person like that. Okay, the third point I wanted to talk about was the idea of occupation, Israel stealing land. Okay, and again, as we said before, let's be clear. In 2005, Israel removed 8,000 Israeli civilians and military personnel from the Gaza Strip and gave the whole thing back to the Palestinian people in Gaza. If the issue was really about land, so that should have settled it. Right? You got what you wanted. Now you have complete control. That was never really the issue. In the same way that the PLO, who always said that what they wanted was land, was founded in 1964, before the Six-Day War, when Israel won all of that land. Right? The PLO was there before the cause they were fighting for existed. What you see from that is that it was never really about the land. Okay? In terms of blockades, because someone mentioned that before, it's true. Israel does not let weapons enter Gaza. That is the thing. That is true. That is the only thing that they prevent from entering. Okay, this notion of Gaza being the world's largest open-air prison, right? It's just ridiculous. First of all, Gaza has a border with Egypt, right? The fact that Egypt doesn't let Palestinians through, again, that's not on Israel. Why isn't the world angry at Egypt about that? Okay? Israel cannot allow Gaza to become, to have more and more weapons flow into it because it's obvious where those weapons are going to be used. So the only blockade is to prevent weapons from entering Gaza.
From the Israeli side.
Also from the sea as well.
But they still get weapons through the tunnels.
Yeah, good, okay. Iran's very smart about how to get weapons. But you do what you can to stop it. You do what you can. At the same time, Israel's been providing electricity, water, gas, education, medical care.
Big
Right.
mistake.
When the leader of Hamas, I forgot his name.
Abu Mazen.
No. He's not the leader of Hamas. When the leader of Hamas had a brain tumor, he got treated in an Israeli hospital.
Yeah, for brain tumor, yeah.
And I promise you they didn't send him a bill either.
And that's ridiculous.
There's something like 15,000 Palestinians a day who go from Gaza into Israel to work. Right? Israel lets 15,000 Gazan workers in a day
I read,
because it's good for everybody. Now,
Yeah.
that's not happening anymore, but
I think even now, Israeli woman drives wounded Palestinians to Israel for treatment.
I don't think
No,
Israel's
not
letting
anymore?
Palestinians into
She
Israel at
used
the
to.
moment. Okay, good. Yes, definitely used to. Probably not.
And
for
I
the
think
worst.
I think they captured her and let her go as a hostage or something.
Okay, just on the point you mentioned before, there was never a Palestinian state in the land of Israel. Okay? It's not that there was a Palestinian country and Israel somehow came and occupied it. There was a Turkish Ottoman Empire, which was then split up, and Israel has just as much right to the land as the Palestinians. In fact, historically speaking, Israel has a much better claim. The Israeli claim to the land is 3,800 years. Okay? We have had an unbroken population of Jews in Israel for the last 3,800 years. The Palestinians, again, at best, you could go back maybe 1,500 years, maybe, but probably not even. Because the reality is that the Turkish Ottoman Empire was one big empire and people moved within it. For the 400 years up until World War I, the Turkish Ottoman Empire ruled not just Palestine, most of what we think of the Middle East these days. Right? It was one big empire, kingdom, whatever you want to call it. Right? What we think of Israel today was a backwater. There was nothing there. There weren't major cities. There wasn't, right? It was like
A desert.
the desert no one wanted to talk about, have anything to do with. When the British took over in after World War I, they split it up into all these different countries. Okay? What we think of modern day Israel was British mandate. There was Jews living there were Arabs living there. The British were controlling it. Okay? The British, the British threw their hands up in 1947 and said, "We're out of here. UN, you work out to do with it." UN came up with a petition plan, half for the Jews, half for the Arabs, and the Arabs rejected it. The Jews accepted it. War of independence. Israel wins more territory, and here we are today. But there was never a Palestinian country of Palestinian people before. Now, again, it doesn't mean that therefore there shouldn't be a Palestinian country going forward. That's not what we're saying, right? Israel's basically policy is a two-state solution. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that everything that is Israel is illegitimate, right? That doesn't mean that the Palestinian people have a right or a greater right to what is the current state of Israel. That just means there has to be some sort of a compromise whereby both sides get land to live in. And again, Israel offered that in 2000 and many, many times, and the Palestinians keep rejecting it. I don't want to talk about it now because of the time, but we could also talk about it from an international law point of view. The Geneva Convention defines occupation in a very specific way, and Israel does not meet that criteria. Israel is not an occupier, even when they were in control of Gaza, which they're not anymore since 2005. There's nothing to talk about. But even then, it's just it's not true, right? It's just not true. Okay, let's go on to excessive force. This is the idea that Israel is attacking Palestinian civilians, genocide, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's understand. Everybody who knows anything about the reality will tell you that the IDF is the most ethical army in the world. Okay? The IDF not only does not target civilians, they go out of their ways to protect civilians. They do things like, do leaflet drops before they're going to attack.
Warning.
They call people up and tell them to get out of the building. right? You know, Israel has complete and utter air superiority in Gaza. There is no Palestinian Air Force, right? Israel could bomb Gaza back into the Middle Ages if they wanted to, with the whole place into a car park, without putting a single troop on the ground. Israel won't do that because a lot of civilians would be killed, right? Israel puts their own soldiers in harm's way in order to go door to door, house to house, you know, city to city, in order to do it in a way where Palestinian civilian casualties will be minimized. Okay? Having said that, Hamas has a vested interest in there being more civilian casualties. It suits their political purposes because then the whole world gets on Israel's back and says you have to stop, and it reinforces the idea of the Palestinian people are the victims, right? So Hamas will do things like prevent civilians from leaving, right? Prevent civilians from fleeing. Use civilians as human shields. Right? Again, this is not because Israel's doing the wrong thing. This is because Hamas is doing the wrong thing. Israel is doing the best it can given a very, very difficult circumstance. And by the way, under international law, right, places like hospitals and all these other things, you're not allowed to attack hospitals. But once enemy combatants are using a hospital as a military resource, military asset, military base, or anything like that, then it no longer has the protection under international law because it's not a hospital anymore, it's a military base, right? That's on Hamas. So you can't say, well, Hamas is allowed to break all of the rules, break all of international law, right? Use people as human shields. Hamas is allowed to do all of those things, but Israel has to play by the rules 150%. Right? It's just, no, Israel has to play by the rules 100%, which they do, but if there's a problem, it's on Hamas. Right? All of those civilian deaths in Gaza are on Hamas. They're not on Israel. I'm sorry to be so blunt.
Media portrays it as Israel bombs a hospital. That's
I understand. A, that's not true. Israel hasn't bombed a hospital. B, yes, Israel had to go into a hospital with troops on the ground, which is a very, very dangerous thing, in order to flush out the Hamas terrorists and get to the tunnels underground. Right? If Hamas had not built tunnels under the hospital, if Hamas was not hiding soldiers, fighters in the hospital, if Hamas had not used the hospitals to keep hostages there, then Israel would have no interest in going into any of those hospitals, I assure you. Okay? Israel has provided fuel and electricity to the hospitals. Israel provided neonatal intensive care units, what do they call those things? Incubators.
Incubators, yeah.
Yeah, to move. Okay, again, the fact that Hamas doesn't let these things through because it doesn't suit their purposes is not on Israel. Israel can only do what it can do. Right? It's all well and good to say Israel should do more. How's that going to work? Right? Israel dropped off fuel at the door of the hospital, and Hamas wouldn't let the hospital use it. So what's Israel meant to do?
do their job to eliminate all of them. That's what Israel has to do.
Like, the one that's like, Israel should provide humanitarians and stuff. Yes, they should, but they can't. It's not from lack of trying. Number 5, I want to talk about the idea of Israel as an apartheid state, as a racist place. Okay. Israel is not. Israel is an open democratic society. We talked about this last week. Israel is about 80% Jewish, about 20% is Arab and other minorities. Israeli Arabs, that is Arabs who are citizens of the state of Israel, which is all the Palestinian people who in 1948 didn't leave, they stayed there. Israel made them full citizens. They have full rights. They get to vote. They get social services. They get everything that Israelis get. The only exemption they have is they don't have to serve in the army, and that, by the way, is mostly because they don't want to serve in the army. It's not because Israel doesn't want them. Right? Druze and Bedouins, Israel's happy to have, if they want to. That's it. Okay. The Israeli Knesset, the parliament, we mentioned this before. The current Knesset has 10 Arab members of the Knesset. There are 29 women. There are 3 openly gay members of the Knesset. Yeah, you won't find that in Gaza, I assure you.
There's no little street in Gaza.
No one.
In Tel Aviv, the street with all the gay bars.
No, every year there is an annual gay and lesbian parade through the streets of Jerusalem. Okay, I assure you there is no equivalent in Gaza City. The Palestinian people who wanted to be Israeli citizens have full rights as Israeli citizens. The Palestinian people who didn't want to be Israeli citizens don't have the same rights as Israeli citizens because they're not Israeli citizens. So it's like saying, it's like Canadians saying, why can't I have the same things that American citizens have? The answer is because you live in a different country, right? It's like people in New Zealand saying, but I don't understand, I want to be an Australian citizen. Well, you can't just decide you want to and then you are, right? They're not Israeli citizens, they're not people of Israel. Israel would be happy to have them, right? They chose not to be. So there is no apartheid state. There is no institutionalized racism like that. What there is there are Israeli Arabs who have the same rights as every other Israeli, and there are non-Israeli citizens who don't have the same rights that Israelis have. Okay?
But they can live in the country?
Can you go and live in America if you want, as a non-citizen?
No.
The answer is no. You're not a citizen. But understand, Hamas didn't go out and say to, the climate changes, you and us, right? We're on the same page here. That's all coming from the climate changes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Again, Hamas would be laughing themselves silly to hear that, the LGBT community is supporting them. Like, that's
Wouldn't they be angered then?
probably offended. But
That's a paradox. Why are they saying
yes, it's ridiculous.
queers for Palestine?
Yes.
They know if they go there,
Yes.
they'll be killed.
Yes.
But why are they doing that?
Because they don't really care about the Palestinians. What they care about is their own cause, and they are piggybacking their cause onto someone else's cause. Whatever's the hot cause, right? Whatever is in the immediate moment, whoever is the underdog, they are riding on their coattails. Like, stop trying to understand. It doesn't make sense. You'll just get ahead.
So they should be sent there to have a look how it is.
The problem is that's not what we do, right? As much as I think these people are wrong,
There's a big
I
problem.
don't want them to be killed. I want them to understand why they're wrong.
I think for me, part of the reason why I came today, I was like, I just finished 6 weeks of driving, and I was like, I gotta be here today. And I think it's in the back of everybody's mind right now. What's happened now, though, it's this problem, and you said you're gonna talk about this next week, but it kind of bleeds into it, is that Israel's doing bad things, and people are like, all these people are saying, oh, Israel's bad. And what's happening now is Israel's bad, oh, therefore Jews are bad, and because Jews are complicit with this, it's okay now for Arabs to go through the streets in Sydney and bully Jews. That's okay now. And I think in the back of our minds, like, this is where we're headed. So it's not just Israel now, it's
whole
Jews
youth.
in general, because we support Israel.
There is anti-Semitism at play
And
here.
it's
No question about it.
These people that are pro-Palestinian now are also going, oh, well, you know what? We'll also allow random Arabs that have nothing to do with Palestinians just to go protest in front of synagogues and bully people who are just trying to go to synagogue.
And Hamas,
we're going to support that as well, because that's in line with us being pro-Palestinian. And that's where I think, the problem is like, where it's not just anti-Israel.
Hamas
it is
doesn't
bleeding into
just
that.
talk about Israel, they talk about Jews.
Yes.
Okay? And they're not just talking about Jews in Israel either.
Yeah.
They're talking about Jews around the world.
That's right.
And it's having more than any time in I think my lifetime, I'm seeing the effects of it, like where people are going, people that it's not just right wingers, it's people on the left too going, yeah, it's okay for people to bully Jews now because like they support Israel, so you know what, we're gonna let whoever like be anti-Semitic and we're gonna give them a pass.
So we're going to talk all about that next week. Okay, that's next week. I would say that the most important thing is for ourselves to understand within our heads.
Yeah.
Right? Before you try and explain it to anybody else, you have to understand it for yourself. And be clear on, what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's not true. To the best you can. When we start talking about anti-Semitism, and this is, I don't want to give next week's class this week, but there are two ways to respond to anti-Semitism. One way is, let me fix the other guy. And another way is, what can I do within myself to address anti-Semitism, right? And we need to talk about both of those things, and that's going to be really next week's topic. Yeah, really everything we've talked about this week is about how you communicate to other people, but there is a large part of this which is how do you get it clear within yourself. Yeah? The worst response that a person could have would be to say, I'm embarrassed to be Jewish, I'm going to hide being Jewish, I'm going to act like it doesn't affect me, I'm going to, right? That would be the worst response. Okay?
But sometimes, that's the response that, like, for me, I feel that way. Like, I don't want to feel like a coward, but I haven't posted anything on my social media about Israel at all because the amount of energy I'll have to pour into it to fight against the people that I know are going
to. I didn't say you have to go on the offense.
Yeah.
I'm just saying within yourself you have to be clear. Okay, next week we're going to talk about anti-Semitism. I feel like I mentioned that already. But we're going to talk about, we're going to look at, historically speaking, how anti-Semitism is a phenomenon unlike any other phenomenon in the world. We're going to talk about where that comes from, both in terms of the practical considerations, but also from a religious point of view as well, and how we best respond to anti-Semitism, how we really address the problem in a way where it's not just pushing it under the carpet, it's not just running away and hoping it goes away on its own, it's actually addressing the real underlying causes of anti-Semitism.